Hey everyone and welcome to another video, guys, and today we're going to be touching on a few of the most common toxic review habits. Now this is something that's only recently come to my attention because I've been doing a lot more coaching sessions within my brand new coaching platform, which I'll talk about in another video soon. But I truly believe this is significantly holding back a lot of players from improving within their own time. And I feel like it was so significant that I had to make its own separate video just on this topic. So today what I'm going to be doing is breaking down a lot of these toxic review habits and really trying to clarify how reviewing in League should really be done. Now, in order to better demonstrate what I mean by having a good quality review or having the appropriate mindset when heading into a review, I want to explain it through the analogy of an aeroplane seatbelt. Now, let's just imagine we go into a plane, we sit down into our seat, we strap ourselves in with this little belt buckle here, and we strap ourselves in really tight. The stewardess is coming sure, making sure it's really tight. Now, what this seatbelt actually represents is the amount of control we have over a game. If it's maximally tight, it means we have the most amount of control over the game. Because if you think about it, at the beginning of the game at minute 1, right, we have the most control possible over the game. The first 5, 6, 7 minutes, we have the most control. As the game goes further and further on, we have less and less control because everyone's roaming, there's team fights, things are happening, objectives. At the very, very beginning, it's just you versus your opponent, early laning phase, you control pretty much majority of the variables. Now, as the game goes on and maybe you make a little mistake, what this represents is the seatbelt actually loosening a little bit. So one little mistake loosens a little bit. Another mistake loosens a little bit more. And then if things, chaotic things happen around you, the plane starts moving, the higher the chance that you're going to have, or you're going to fall out of your seat, or the seatbelt's actually going to come off, and you're going to have no or very little control of the outcome of the game. And what people fail to realize is that all of these small details contribute to you either having control over your game or the game being largely coin flip. Okay, and if you make a really big mistake, sometimes the seatbelt can come loose instantly just off one major mistake. So let's actually go through a few of these, what these small details may look like. It can be as small as accidentally pushing the wave level 1, resulting in a loss of trade opportunity. This is very relevant if you're playing champions like Echo or Fizz or any burst-oriented assassin. Not allowing the wave to bounce back out for a possible gank. Very important if you're playing a champion with a lot of gank setup, or you're versing a champion that really needs to be punished levels 1 to 6. For example, a Kassadin. Failing to assess and adapt to the itemization of the enemy. If the enemy comes back with no refillable and you have a corrupting pot and you don't heavy trade and create a resource advantage, that's a massive loss of opportunity. Next one here, not punishing the usage of just one ability. Maybe the Ari just uses charm in your face and you do nothing about it. You don't change the way you position in the lane. You don't change anything about your trading patterns. Not punishing the TP versus ignite advantage. Very, very common mistake. These are just all very small, some of them a little bit bigger than the other, but they're all relatively small mistakes that in isolation, you look at it and you might be like, you know what? This might not change the outcome of a game. That's what people's thought process is. This is not going to really change anything. But it's actually massive. All of these small details, or especially these ones that are at the beginning of the game, this is what dictates the amount of control you're going to have over the game. So what I've found, and we're going to get into this later on, is that people, they see these mistakes, whether even sometimes they're as big as, having to blow flash at 2 minutes 40 because they didn't simply ward to one side and lean, and then they realize why they lose that 6-minute river skirmish, or they realize that the enemy's been able to roam because you've been too scared to push up, and then the game feels out of your control. They fail to realize that these small details is actually what adds up or largely dictates the amount of control you have in a game. And look, getting into the review is not meant to be sexy, right? It's boring, it's tiresome, it's annoying. You're not just going to go into a review and go to 15 minutes and see some big macro decision and be like, this was the reason I lost. No, that's a misconception. That's not how improvement or winning in League really works. It's the incremental, small little mistakes, small little things that you do in the first 6, 7, 8 minutes of the game that largely dictate how much control you're going to have over the game. Now, I'm not saying that, the game is lost if you don't do one of these things, but again, tying back to the seatbelt analogy, we want to maximize the amount of control we have in a game. We don't want it to loosen even the slightest little bit. We want to maximize our chances of winning and controlling the variables that are in our control. Now, another way of framing it, if the previous analogy didn't really resonate with you or it didn't really make sense to you, this is a more like simplistic or crude way of explaining it. Let's just say for the first 4 to 5 minutes of the game, there are 3 minor decisions that you made. The first one was like holding versus shoving the wave. The second one was resetting versus staying. And the third one was like roaming versus plates. It was something like this. 3 minor decisions made in the first 4 to 5 minutes. And we could get into the review and we could say this one was the optimal decision. Objectively, this one was the optimal decision and this one was the optimal decision. We could do this whether it's with a coach or with your friend or just by yourself. We could do this, okay, pretty easily. If we follow the fundamentals like leaning, warding, jungle tracking, wave management, champion identity understanding, all of these things, we could actually replicate doing this nearly every single game as well. But what I've noticed, just the trend that I've seen, is that a few things might actually happen when people go into the review. They'll get to 4 to 5 minutes, realize that their score is like 0-0-0, or maybe it's like 1-0, or whatever it is, and they kind of skip over this stuff. You know, they could technically get into the review and really, analyze these decisions that they've made, but they choose not to. And the dangerous thing about this, guys, is that you might not even realize you've actually taken the suboptimal route here, then the suboptimal route here, then the suboptimal route here, and then before you know it, you're at 8 minutes, and then you start thinking to yourself, why does this game feel so out of my control? Why does it feel like everything that's happening around me feels like I feel like I'm a victim? It's just a coin flip game. I've got 2 losing sides and my jungler's doing things without me and so on and so forth. The game will feel coin flip, but they don't realize, because they haven't gone into the review, they haven't got into the details, they haven't got very specific. They don't realize that they've actually taken a path, or they're in an alternate reality where they've gone suboptimal, suboptimal, suboptimal. And yes, every single decision they make from 8 minutes onwards, it could be fine, but they're already in a massive hole. They haven't controlled the variables that are in their control. They're in a reality where largely you've loosened the seatbelt so much that you have very little say of what's going to happen into the game. And the crazy thing is if you just follow the fundamentals, you get into the review, we can pretty much replicate ourselves getting into a very solid position by 8 minutes every single game by making optimal decision, optimal decision, optimal decision. If we really get very specific here, and then what's it gonna feel like? That seatbelt's gonna be really tight, and then, oh wow, I'm here at every fight. I'm spotting out the enemy jungler. My side lanes aren't dying as much, or I'm there to counter gank, or I'm the one stacking objectives, or I'm the one setting up the gank here, or the situations that you're gonna be within are much more favorable. Now, so what I've actually seen within the coaching sessions as well is that either they skip over these things completely, or they go into the review and they don't put enough emphasis on these details. So they're like, oh yeah, you're right, Curtis. I probably should have held the wave. But they don't realize that this is massive. They don't realize that this has a chain effect for the rest of the game. Remembering that this is the time, this first 5, 6, 7 minutes of the game, this is when we exert the most control. Now, this actually leads to one of my own personal breakthroughs, right? I remember, this is actually somewhat recently, probably a year ago, 2 years ago. I used to look at OPGGs of players like Showmaker and Rookie and things like that, and I would see in their OPGG that they would have 9 CS per minute every game plus. And I'd always think to myself, how is that possible? They're in fast-paced Korean or Chinese challenger games, and how is that possible? How are they able to replicate getting these sorts of CS numbers no matter what? It always got me thinking, okay, maybe they're just talented or they understand concepts I don't understand. And the reason I was never able to do this sort of thing was because I never got into the details in my review. I always thought that they were doing something special later on, or they would just outplay their opponent, or something 8 minutes onwards, or their mid-game team fighting, or whatever it was, or their mid-game side laning, that was what was allowing them to get these crazy CS numbers. But what I failed to realize was that back in the past, and because I never got into the details and really got into the real specifics within my first 5, 6, 7 minutes of the game, my entire early game was coin flip. Everything was essentially coin flip. I didn't know how I wanted to play the waves exactly. I didn't know what gold amounts that I wanted to reset. I didn't know how the trading patterns went specifically in this matchup. I was playing at a very surface level. And now this year, and towards the end of last year, I started to become a lot more consistent. And when I tried my best playing my best champions, I could pretty reliably get good CS numbers even if I lost. because I'm replicating the fundamentals and I understand all the specifics and all the steps that I need to take to replicate a good quality game. And this is just somewhat recently on my OPGG. Like, I got 9.2, 8.5, 8.3, 9.4, 9.1. This was a bad game, 6.7, 9.3. Even in my losses, I'm still getting good CS. And it's nothing to do with my mid game. There's nothing to do with my mid to late game. It's actually all because of my first 10, 12 minutes of the game, because I'm really understanding the fundamentals. And the biggest misconception, one of the biggest misconceptions I see with lower elo players is that they view these players as not doing the fundamentals. They view them as like, you know, they're just doing something special. They're talented. Yes, they may be talented, but at the end of the day, if you get very specific, you follow this process like I have before here, this is how we can replicate getting ourselves in a great position. Now, what does this actually lead to? What does this lack of attention to detail mindset lead to? And this lack of attention to detail mindset is, you know, a very simple way of putting it. It might be a little bit more complex or nuanced than this, but this is kind of how I summarize it. It actually leads to the inability to replicate getting leads in the game, or the part of the game where they actually have the most control. Right? If you're going into a game and you feel like games are coin flip, this is likely what is happening. You probably don't know how to replicate getting leads. Yes, you might get that solo kill 1 every 3 games, or you might get lucky and win that river skirmish at 6 minutes that game. But is that replicable? Did the way you played that, is it replicable? Did the way you played out that first 5 minutes, was that something you could replicate? Was your jungler going to come there every single time because you managed the wave and you warded? Or what was it that, I mean, it could have just been coin flip. Who knows? The other thing as well is that it actually leads to this consistent coin flip style of game where you're even or slightly behind heading into the mid game. So if you find yourself, you're at 12 minutes or 10 minutes into the game and you're just even, or maybe you're slightly behind, likely the game is going to feel coin flip. It's likely going to feel out of your control. And again, this probably lends to you having a lack of attention to detail mindset. And this also leads to more and more emphasis being put on bad teammates and AFKs. And this is the other reason why I just don't give a shit about how many bad games I have or bad teammates or my jungler doing this and my top laner doing that. Because I guess regardless of them doing that, I'm quite confident in myself, putting myself in a very solid position no matter what. Whereas in some games, by the way, even if I say we do this again and I take the optimal route every single time, optimal. Some games based off the champions in the game, maybe an optimal decision or an optimal, even though I made the correct decision every single time, sometimes this might just mean I'm 0-0-0. Whereas I didn't actually realize if I took one suboptimal decision here, I might have been 0-1-0. So it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to solo kill someone or get all these kills and do all this crazy shit. Sometimes just based off your champion, it just means you were able to minimize perfectly. This is where, you know, getting into the matchup specifics really comes into play here. And the other thing it actually does, it actually leads to a lack of motivation to review and play solo queue. And I resonate with this. I understand, because if games felt like they were out of your control and they felt like, you know, every game's just a coin flip and it just depends on what players are on your team, then no shit, I'm not going to want to review my games. What's the point? If it's all to do with who's on my team or what champions I get on my team or all this bullshit, then of course I'm not going to review. So it actually leads to a lack of motivation because you don't even know that these small details are actually creating an alternate reality. Now, just because you make one mistake, and I've heard this before in the Discord, people say, Curtis, doesn't that mean, you know, are you saying that we have to play perfectly every single game? No, just because you make that one mistake in the early game doesn't mean the game is over, but it may simply mean that the game is not totally in your control anymore, or you've just loosened that seatbelt so you have a little bit less control over the game. This doesn't mean that in the game you make a mistake and you just give up, because obviously enemies are going to make mistakes and things like that, but we're just talking about optimizing here. And remember, there will be games where you play the entire early game near flawlessly. And maybe if you're like a high diamond player, maybe you've perfected your first 6-7 minutes of the game. Great. Then that's a point in time, maybe you need to get into your mid game. But in my opinion, mid to late game optimization doesn't really come into play until like high platinum. That's what I believe anyway. That's just my theory. Now for some of the biggest misconceptions that people have around VOD reviewing and coaching in general. And the first one, and this is actually a little bit of a pet peeve for me as well, is that people believe that there's going to be just this one massive, big, obvious problem at 15 minutes. And if you solve this big problem, then they're finally going to be able to climb. You know, this is one massive, obvious problem. No, in my experience, this has never been the case. I don't go into my VODs and then go to like 15 minutes or go to mid-game and be like, this was the reason I lost. This was the one big decision. If I fix this, I'm going to be all good. I'm going to climb to rank 1. No, this is not how league improvement works whatsoever. As I've stated in this game, go back to minute 1. Look at your level, your first 6-7 minutes of the game. Look at all the small little details and tie it back to the fundamentals of the game. Look at your leaning, your warding, your trading patterns, your reset timers, your posturing in the lane. Look at every little detail. These are the things that lead to the situation you're in at 15 minutes, and that is what is most important. These are the replicable things. When I get into a review with a client, I'm not skipping to mid-game or going over these small decisions or mistakes that they made in the early game, looking over them and be like, oh yeah, your mid-game, you didn't group here, this was the big reason you lost the game. No, never. I don't think I've ever done that. Because I just know that's not what gets people results. Yes, I could do that, and I could go to 50 minutes and say, yeah, here you misplayed this team fight, or here you should be positioning here. This is only the sort of thing that a very high elo player should be looking at. If you're Master Plus, then sure. Or D2 Plus, then maybe we can start to get to this level of detail into the mid to late game. But I highly, highly doubt that this is the problem for the large majority of league players. So guys, again, it's very non-sexy, it's very dirty, it's very sloppy. We've got to get back to that first 6, 7, 8 minutes of the game and find out why we are even in this position in the first place. And yes, doesn't mean we don't focus on one thing, but it's probably a small fundamental or like an actual basic thing about the game that we need to direct our focus on. And this second one is a massive pet peeve of mine, and I don't really understand why this is the case, but in the history of coaching in League of Legends, say if the average player were to get a coach, they would go through a VOD for like an hour, right? You go, whoever, Joe Blog, the coach, here's my VOD, let's go over it for an hour. What I realized, and I did this in the past, it makes no sense. And it made no sense because this is not what I do in my own VOD reviews. And what I've realized, why am I looking at a 25-minute team fight if this guy died to a basic 2-minute 40 gank and stayed in the lane with no resources and based on 1500 gold and allowed the enemy to go bot and get a double kill, or instead of slow building a wave out and looking for a roam topside to snowball the winning side, held the wave for a freeze at 10 minutes and just did nothing. Like, these are all just like real core fundamental mistakes that I don't give a shit what happened to that team fight at 15 minutes or that river skirmish at 13 minutes. The reason you're even in this situation in the first place is that your fundamentals of the game in the first 8 minutes are so flawed that no wonder your games are coin flip in mid-game. Why do I need to look at a VOD for an hour? That's why in my new coaching platform, VOD reviews only go for max 20 minutes. And then there's probably 5 minutes of discussion on the end, so max 25 minutes. That's a much healthier way of doing it. And this way I can get through many more VODs, a lot more coaching sessions. Then you can start to see the trends of your entire early to mid game. And then you get to set really actionable learning objectives. And the analogy I like to use for this, guys, is like a tennis match. People view one VOD review as like an entire game of tennis. Whereas I view one VOD review as 1 point. And then you do one VOD review, that's 1 point. And then you do a second VOD review, that's reviewing the second point. And then the third VOD review is just another point. And if you were a tennis coach with a tennis player, you would go over all these points and try to find the trends between these points and what's going wrong here. Why are we losing points? What do we need to work on? But no, people view this one VOD as one game, and now I know everything about all my problems. That's not the way it works. What you guys should do, if you're playing a block of 6 a day, you line up all of your VODs at the end of the day, and you start to try and find the trends. What's going on here? Is my laning poor? Is my warding poor? Was my trading patterns poor? Why does it always feel like the game's out of control? Like, am I always giving too much pressure here? What is the core fundamental reason? What's going wrong here? Then you can start to see the trends if you're only looking the first 10 minutes. Whether you do this with a friend, why you do this by yourself using my content, whether you get coaching from someone. This is the way I believe coaching or just VOD reviewing in general should be done. And the last misconception here, guys, is that people think that the small details in the early game aren't really that impactful whatsoever. And just as a rough example here, let's just make one up. Let's just say I'm playing Fizz. And I played off the bounced wave. The wave came to me levels 1 and 2. I played off the bounced wave at level 3. I started slow building out. And I use all of my corrupting pots trying to get the wave out. And I have a choice to either tempo reset for maybe a Dark Seal. Maybe I can't afford my 750 gold and get a Dark Seal and a Dones, and I can only get a Dark Seal. Or I can stay in the lane and greed for maybe a little bit more gold. Or for some reason I just don't reset, I'm autopiloting, or for whatever reason I stay on the map. Now, what's going to happen? If I were to reset, I would have tempo over the enemy Ari. So I'm versing an Ari, and I would have tempo, which would mean I would be able to come back. The wave is likely going to be back on my side because it's going to crash and it's going to come back on my side and be in slow build back to me or hard push back to me. But I'm going to have tempo. What can I do with that tempo? I can get deep wards. I can maybe go for a sneaky roam. I can then start my slow build up into another tempo reset. There's more things I can do on the map, or maybe my reset was synced up with my jungler. I can back up my jungler, whatever I want to do. Conversely, if I stayed on the map, what might happen? Well, then maybe the enemy Ari then slow builds into me. I have to catch all this under tower, in which I have no resources to heavy trade because I have no more corrupting bot stacks. And then what happens, I'm not abusing my early power spike with my early dark seal, and then I'm forced to base on a much larger number, which actually benefits the mage versus the assassin. Then I also don't have tempo opportunity because they're going to get the reset over me, which means that maybe that allows them to get deep wards on my raptors. It allows them to get pink wards out and isolate the lane, which makes it harder for me to trade. And maybe because I've got that deep ward on the raptors, is actually spot my jungler, which means my jungler then fails that bot gank because the whole enemy team knows where that guy is. It's a whole different reality. Just off that one simple decision made it like 4 minutes. And again, what's going to happen in the second core decision, the third core decision? And we're already at maybe at like 5 or 6 minutes, but you can be in a completely different game based off of 2 or 3 simple decisions. Done. So I think this proves the point that the small details really do matter. Now, what we're going to do is go through a few examples of both myself and some coaching clients to highlight some of these details. Some of them are quite large, some of them are quite small. And what I want to really highlight here is these are the sorts of things that I would highlight and somewhat end the review after. I'll be like, okay, this was the core, this was the big mistake relatively early on into the game. There's not really much value going on too much further. The game is now out of my control. And remember, one last time here, doesn't mean that the game is over. It just means that the game is largely out of my control. So if I'm playing the game and I identify this consciously as a big mistake or a small mistake, don't give up. Play the game because the enemy is likely going to make a mistake as well. But this is what's going to really allow us to refine our gameplay and become a much more consistent mid laner. So what we're going to do now, guys, is break down a series of my mistakes from my own VODs and really break them down as if I was reviewing my own game. So this first one was just map assessment failure. So I'm playing Cassiopeia versus Syndra here. I'm in a pretty bloody good situation. I've been dominating the Syndra in the early portion of the lane. If we take a look at this right now, I played the entire laning phase without burning a single HP bot. Forced Syndra to come back and already use TP. I've still got a decent amount of mana. I've got my flash, got my TP, 2 pots still. I'm in a great position. So the Syndra TP's back. In order to get max value from my TP, I'm trying to look for a heavy trade and then TP back myself. So I get a Q, E. Now I've already got the Syndra to half HP and I still haven't even reset yet. And I'm going to be able to come back with a really good quality reset myself. So I'm just chilling here, trying to milk the amount of value I can get from my first TP of the game. Skarner comes by, solid jungle tracking and warding allows me to lean to the correct side, which means I don't have to blow flash or anything like that. Beautiful. And now I try to shove out here so I can get a decent quality reset for myself. So I back up here and go for a reset here. Now, I start my recall. I'm thinking to myself, great, Curtis, you're doing really well. Continue up this domination. You can get a good quality reset for a tier, Sapphire, Crystal, Pink. I don't even need to buy refillable because I still have my 2 pots here. And I can even freeze the wave on my side. And there's nothing that Syndra can do. Beautiful. So I even walk up to try and spot the Syndra. And I'm thinking to myself, oh, maybe she's gone for another tempo reset. Cool. So then I freeze the wave here. Get a pink off to one side so I can lean. And another ward. Clear a pink ward as well. All is going well. And then I'm like, oh, wait, what? Syndra roam top and kill my top laner? Oh, shit. Wow. Oh, I didn't even think about that. So then I realized in my VOD review, what did I fail to assess? So I'll go to this thing here. And people may think, you're fine. You're still doing well. You've got your TP back. You're dominating the laning phase. But no, this is a massive fail. What would have been a very slow game, now it was actually the first kill of the game, I'm going really, really well. I failed to completely assess the actual variables on the map. I didn't actually see that Camille was slow building a wave on top side. I actually forgot to realize that my jungle's bot side, Skarner's top side, so Syndra actually feels completely free to go top side and go for this dive as well. And I had TP. I could have easily held my TP here. I could have done 2 things. I actually could have stayed in the lane longer, knowing that Camille was slow building waves that Syndra couldn't go for this. and actually maybe tried to bully out Syndra more, or even ward off to one side. I could have maybe warded off to one side over here, knowing that Syndra could maybe roam top side. I could have actually held my TP and actually failed to freeze the wave and missed 6 CS just to defend my top laner. I could have even walked straight top out of base, maybe. I don't know. There's a bunch of things that I could have done here, but I didn't do any of them because I was not aware of what was going on the map. And this is something I would go into my VOD review and say, okay, is this a trend? Am I actually aware of what's going on to the map? And what I've realized in my own gameplay so far is that I'm not. A lot of the time, what I've realized with my own gameplay is that I'm not considering what else is happening and what my teammates are doing when structuring and thinking about my own strategy. When you're thinking about what you can do in your lane or how you should do your trades, or we talk about the high levels here, I should be thinking about what's my jungle doing? How's my bot lane trading? How's my top lane trading? How much kill threat? How much roam threat does the enemy Syndra have? I completely disregarded that Syndra could even roam topside here. This was a massive mistake. Okay, this is the sort of thing that I would do in my own review. So going on to the next point here. This was an example of lack of summoner spell assessment. Pretty early on into the game, 3 minutes 30, and my thought process was here, I'm going to heavy trade and probably look for an early reset, knowing that this RE doesn't have corrupting pod. Unfortunately, I take a tower hit there. And it's like a pretty average trade. This is something I would review in my own time as well. But the main point here was that I didn't realize that Ari didn't have Ignite. Ari actually had TP. So instead of resetting right now and matching tempo with the Ari, because it's a cannon wave as well, I stay. And look what happens. Ari, fast forwarding here, Ari resets. TP's back. And I'm like, oh wait, what? I didn't know she had TP. And then I end up dying here. Boom. First blood to the Evelyn. Or the Ari, sorry. The game is now out of my control. Everything that happens post this decision, I can review it for little optimizations if I really want to. But at the end of the day, this is the core mistake. The game is now officially out of control. Referring back to the seatbelt example, the seatbelt is just off. I am done. And that's all based off summoner spell assessment. Now, this actually ties me to one, and I said this somewhere in another video. This is super important. This is why coming into a game super focused, utilizing the loading screen is very important. Right? Say if I come into a game and I'm a little bit tired, autopiloting, and I don't assess the basic variables. I didn't assess their runes. I didn't assess their summoner spells. I just lost focus, or I just wasn't playing super focused. How do I know whether this mistake was a result of me and my level of play, or how do I know if this was just me just not playing focused? And then I come out of the review, I'm like, you know what, Curtis? Maybe I just get nothing from that review. Now that is a waste of a game. So this is why coming into a game when you're not really focused is just an absolute nightmare. Not really for the loss, who gives a shit about the one loss, it's about the lack of learning. So that was a pretty massive mistake. Now next one, again, poor variable assessment. Here I'm starting to dominate lane versus a Yone. Yone's quite low, I have a blue buff, but I don't have any more pots, and this Yone actually has fleet, so he actually has a little bit more sustain than me here, in terms of just HP. But little do I realize right now, I could go for a very good quality reset. My jungler and my team aren't really in the area. Yes, I have a lot of vision, so I don't need to be scared. But I have TP. Why am I trying to coin flip this and outplay this guy when I can just come back, refresh my corrupting pot stacks, TP back to the lane, Yone can't match the TP, then I can do whatever the hell I want to do. And I mess up, I overstay in the lane, Yone gets a really nice E into a Q3, and then I die. Now, doesn't matter how well I've done up until that point. This one mistake now loosens that seatbelt, and now the game is largely out, or much less in my control. And as a result, coming back, 2 minutes after, Yone is so powerful that he can pretty much 100-0 me even without ultimate like this. Boom. And then I just die again. That's the result of that one mistake. And that is the perfect example of how one mistake can have a flow-on effect. If I reset when I did, and I didn't give Yone that kill, he wouldn't be strong enough to do this sort of thing. And then it's a completely different reality. Or maybe I would already have mid tower and I wouldn't be in this situation. And who knows? Again, you can kind of see what the point I'm trying to make here. Fast forwarding. Now, this is a perfect example of another thing. Level 1, I didn't actually assess it. I have a Mundo jungle. They have a Viego and a Yasuo. I don't want to take early game 2v2s. I don't want to take early game 2v2s. But I go for a trade here. And I remember in this moment, I actively did not queue out thinking that my Mundo was in the area and it's great for us to take a 2v2. Yes, minus the mechanical misplay in here and me not having E, I still thought that we could maybe win the 2v2 because whenever I have my jungle in the area like this, I always feel like, oh, that's a great counter gank. Level 3 Mundo versus level 2 Viego. It should be all good. But no, there is no reality in which me and Yasuo, maybe I dodge this and things are a little bit better, but there's no reality in which our mid jungle 2v2 is better than theirs. Maybe if I play this a little bit better, yeah, but yes, why coin flip? My Mundo doesn't want this sort of thing. So again, this is something that I'll review. Well, it doesn't matter what happens after this. We've just given a double kill to the, double kill to the Viego. Nothing else really matters. Now I'm playing where the seatbelt is completely ripped off. And people will go into the review, see this sort of thing, maybe not even this extreme. It could just be like one of you dies or you have to blow flash, and they'll think, oh, yeah, okay. And then they'll look at that 8-minute river skirmish and realize why they're in such a bad position, or wonder why the game is so coin flip or feels out of their control. Well, no shit. This is a pretty big mistake. And then I'll go into the core reasons. Why did I think that we could win the 2v2? Did I not utilize the loading screen? Was I autopiloting? Was I alt-tabbing? Did I have misinformation about the strength of Mundo? Then I can really get into the review. And is this a trend happening? Is this something that's happening in a majority of my games? I don't know. So let's actually go into a few more examples, but this time from some of my coaching clients. Now, this was a recent VOD from one of my coaching clients. I believe this is Platinum Victor versus a Platinum Katarina. And he's executed upon the how to counter Katarina video flawlessly. He's slow built waves. He's harassed his Katarina. He's isolated the lane. He's exerted a lot of pressure and relieved pressure from his bot lane. He's done everything correct. Perfect textbook gameplay. And I was watching this VOD, I'm like, wow, this is really, really good gameplay. 55 CS by 7 minutes, which is not too bad at all. He's done everything beautifully. Now, at this point on, all he has to do, he doesn't even have to kill the Katarina. All he has to do is continue to isolate the lane, lean away from the jungler. We know Olaf is bot side right now. Lean, look for a pretty good quality reset very soon because his jungler is actually reset. Start to control top side, go for that Rift Herald, constantly do the same thing, slow build waves, and prevent Katarina from roaming and doing anything on the map. So fast forwarding here, continuing on, he probably has a brief moment of loss of focus, or maybe he's too cocky, or whatever reason. And then he goes for a solo kill onto the Katarina, blows his flash, and trades kills with the Katarina. And I thought to myself, holy moly, this is it. The game is now officially out of your control. And to prove it, let's literally show you what happens. So what went from an amazing situation where Katarina can't do anything, you should go for the tempo reset over the Katarina. Or even what he also could have done here is maybe even ult the wave for a quick tempo reset and to sync his recall with the jungler and then play the top side. He could have done so many things here. But after he died here, Katarina died first, so she had tempo. And we know Katarina is a champion that all she needs is one single kill and then she can do whatever she wants. So fast forwarding, Katarina comes to lane before the Victor. Katarina is now able to shove out the wave. The one wave of priority she had this entire game, despite Victor pinging, she goes bot, and I believe she gets a double kill bot. Or she gets one kill for the MF, and then she ends up cleaning up the Yuumi. And then she ends up taking over this game. Look at that. That went from isolating the lane perfectly, Katarina's out of the game, low HP under tower, to bot lane now getting double killed. In 2 minutes, the game has gone from completely in his control to completely out of his control. The seatbelt's been ripped off of one mistake. Nothing else is worth reviewing. End of review. So we can end, we ended this review at 7 minutes 30. End of review. That's all it takes, guys. One simple mistake can make the game out of your control. Now, with this example here, this was of a Fizz versus Diana. And he played the early game quite well. He's 3-1. He's very strong. And I believe his bot lane is actually winning as well. He has a winning side. And remember, Fizz is a champion that always wants a secondary win condition or another side, because Fizz is not a solo carry, 1v9 carry, because he doesn't have sustained damage. She shoves the wave in here. Beautiful. Gets the Scry's Bloom. Gets the Blast Cone. Helps his team do the Dragon. Beautiful. This is perfect for him. He could go for a nice little tempo reset, replenish his corrupting pot stacks, recall with the rest of his team, and continue to play mid to bot, have the tempo reset over the Diana, move his vision topside, sweep all the way down, and continue to look to dive bot and complement his winning side. But look what he does instead. He goes mid, misses the perfect tempo reset opportunity on the cannon wave, doesn't replenish his corrupting pot stacks, and now his Poppy has to go do a full clear or something like that, and instead of resetting here, ends up going for a solo kill onto the Diana, already when this Diana has died like twice and is diminishing returns. So even if he's able to get this kill, it doesn't do anything for the game because he's going to have to reset after anyway, and he's going to get very minimal gold. And on top of this, he's on 1200 gold and he has no corrupting pot stacks. So he goes for this, boom, goes for an all-in, and then dies, gives a 300 gold shutdown to the Diana, and then the game is out of his control. Done. End of review. 9 minutes 15. That may look on the surface here, this loss of reset opportunity might look like a very minor mistake, but this has game-changing consequences. Then after this, Diana gets the shutdown. He comes back. After this, he has no ultimate. His bot lane, he hasn't been able to influence the bot lane. Then a river skirmish happens in a moment where Diana cleans up again because she's way stronger than she would have been when Fizz would have just been bot right now, diving bot with his Maokai and his Fed Draven. The game is completely different. Again, simple mistake, but it's very important and it changes the entire outcome of the game. End of review at 9 minutes 30. Now in this review here, this Victor played the entire early lane perfectly versus his Sylas. Actually bounced the wave out, can keep the wave on his side here. He has still 2 health pots. Sylas has Conqueror with Ignite and no pots here, no sustain. So this Sylas is screwed. All he has to do is thin the wave a little bit here, hold the wave on his side. He's going to get 6 soon, and then he's going to be able to exert a lot of pressure on the map and deny a bunch of CS from the Sylas. He doesn't need to do anything special right now. But fast forwarding, Sylas looks for some heavy trades here, but not too bad. And then look what happens. We knew, because it's 5 minutes 30, that the enemy jungler is going to be going back onto the rubber banded camps, and we follow and we compensate for the Kayn into this fight. Kayn goes in mindlessly, ends up dying, giving a kill to the Kha'Zix. Because we compensated, we end up dying on the back end here as well, or having to, I think we actually die here. No, we actually just survive. So we just survive. Already what would have been a really bad situation, and then we compensate a little bit more or try and make the best of a bad situation, and then we die. End of review. The game is now officially out of your control. Simple. All we had to do back here was ping off way in advance. This gank was never going to work. He's too far away. We failed the W. It's never going to work. Get the chunk, then go back. Even if Kha'Zix got the kill, it would have been completely fine. But as soon as you died to the Sylas after, and then took that massive chunk, you haven't punished the early game mistakes from the Sylas. You're not going to be able to punish the early game mistakes from the Sylas. Then Sylas starts winning trades really hard, and the game is out of his control. And that's it. Look, and I'm probably not even going to be able to set an actionable learning objective off this one VOD. But I can look at, I know the fundamental thing here, one of the issues here was that there was a lack of jungle tracking. Because if he knew where the jungle was, he would have called that off. Or maybe it's a compensation problem. Then we'll go back into other reviews, or he should go into other reviews, or look at other people's coaching sessions and see, is this a sort of common problem I see at this ELO? What sort of problem do I have? If I were to look at 6 of my VODs, what am I seeing? What are the trends? Okay, guys, so hopefully you get to see here where I'm coming from. And look, I'm not saying that the game is completely over, and I'm not saying you can't look at the rest of the VOD, but what I am saying is that these mistakes or these decisions have game-altering consequences. And if you're not putting emphasis on them, and you're wondering why the game is feeling coin flip at 15 minutes, then this is it. This is why your games are feeling coin flip at 15 minutes. So get into the review, guys, get into the details, and hopefully this sheds a little insight into the way I view reviewing in general. And if you have any questions about my new coaching platform, don't worry. I will be releasing a video on that very shortly. So thanks, guys, for tuning in, and I'll see you for the next video. Cheers.